Okay, I would like to welcome each and every one of you to the CNFO Leadership Institute again. I'm very happy that you're here, and it's very fulfilling for the CNFO to be accomplishing one of its goals, which is to build capacity. So we're happy for this Leadership Institute, and we're happy that you're here. I won't take up any time from Tylon. So Tylon, I want to go right over to you, sir, and you can run the show. I will mute. Good night, everyone.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, Tylon, you're loud and clear.
Okay, great. Can everyone see my screen as well?
I can see you.
Okay, great. Right. So tonight, briefly touch on them to kind of wet the throat. To basically give an intro into these 4 areas here. So advocacy, right? So public support for or recommendations for a particular cause, policy, or legislation, etc. Right? So advocacy is basically looking for support from the public to get policies passed, to get legislations in place, or for any particular cause that would need you to engage the public, right? Advocacy, this is activities that aim to influence decisions within social, political, or economic institutions, right? So you basically would be engaging these institutions and others to get that, to get some of the decisions that you want passed, or to get some of the decisions that you would have identified as critical to follow through and see it implemented. So right, advocacy can be the active engagement of an audience with the view to influence decision making. So the key component when you're dealing with advocacy is to get your way, basically, or get decisions to be made that is in line with your views and what you want to see out of that engagement. Right. So these are some questions to kind of self-appraise, for it to look within yourself, you know, to be able to answer them, right? So how do we advocate, right? So we set clear objectives. So that's step number 1, right? What do you want to achieve? So you need to figure out what you want to achieve from advocacy, from advocating, right? And you need to know what you're advocating about. So before you set out to go about to advocate for a particular thing, you need to know some content about that thing. You need to know some details and can everyone see my screen? Change all the time.
I believe what I'm seeing is now Nadine's screen. Is that what it says? Yes, I believe what I'm seeing is now Nadine's screen.
Okay.
Tylon, we were not following your.
You were not able to see mine. I probably have some issues.
Tylon, I suggest that you let Nadine advance the slides and you just flow.
No problem. Yeah.
Excellent.
Right. So we'll move to the next slide. Right. So as I was saying before, right. So with advocacy, you need to know your messages. So what do you need to say, right? And your messages need to be clearly articulated. So you need to structure your messages properly so that they're understood and not misinterpreted and stuff like that. And you need to figure out what you want to get across, right? So that is key when you're advocating for something. You need to be clear and concise, and you need to be able to articulate your thoughts so that the others that is listening to you, that would help you, that you would be influencing towards decision making, would understand fully what is it that you're trying to bring across. Next slide. Right. So your audience, so you need to know your audience, right? So who will you be pitching to? So you need to know exactly who you're going to engage. What are their interests? A little bit of their background, so that you have an idea before you're advocating the message that would be directly engaging to this particular group. So, for example, if you're, well, in the context of fisherfolk organizations, if you're advocating to, let's say, the government, you would follow a particular structure, way you would go about to do it that is conducive and that would entertain the way that the government functions and facilitate things, right? So does your audience believe in the same position or policy of your organization? So you need to know that as well. So you could have a varying interests or varying positions that would make your advocacy a little bit more challenging, or it could be a little bit more easy based on if you have that similarity in position or in policy. Basically what that decision that you want to get out of advocating is in line with what both or more parties want, right? What would resonate with your audience? So you need to know where your audience would where that sweet spot is for your audience, basically, and what would get them to be engaged and what would get them to conform to your will and understand why is it that you need to do this particular activity, or you need to get this particular policy passed, and that would resonate with them and they would be more inclined to facilitate or to help that process, right? Actions. So you need actions with advocacy as well. So what are the actions that you need to take to meet your objectives? Do you need to lobby? Do you need to engage? Right? So sometimes advocacy takes a little bit of work, and you might have to go back and forth and lobby and engage with different parties, and it might take more than one day. It might take a couple hours, a couple minutes. It depends, but you need to have that determinants and patience when you're advocating for something, and you need to know the actions that would get you to that objective. So you have a basically like a step that would get you from point A to point D or point B, and then you need to be able to articulate that and get there through advocacy. Next slide, please. Right, so the channels, what are the most effective channels in this instance? So one form or a combination. So you could have letters, you could have the media, you could have social media, you could have press releases and whatnot. Whatever you need to get that message across, whatever medium you need to get that message across, you need to be able to identify that, and you need to be able to identify the most effective medium. So let's say you want to get youth, you might have to use the social media platforms and stuff like that. Rather, for the older folks or whatnot, you might have to send in letters, something a little bit more formal, and you need to be able to identify that. And frequency, does the position require multiple presentations or just one? So do you need to revisit that position, or is one presentation going to get the job done? And if there are need for repeats, so is there a need for repeats? Regular advocating, you need to know that as well. So all of these are questions that you need to self-appraise and ask yourself before you begin advocacy, or before you begin the process or start to engage. These are good questions to ask yourself, to give yourself clarity and make you a little bit better prepared before you were to engage a different organization or party, so that they would understand your position in decision making and stuff like that. Next slide, please. You move on to the next slide. Right, so here you have a cycle, right? So the cycle begins with the analysis of the situation. So you need to analyze the situation, right? So before you make the first step, you need to look around, you need to scrutinize, you need to figure it out basically, right? And then after that, you identify the advocacy issue, right? So what is the thing that you're going to advocate for? You need to identify that. And then you need to set goals and objectives that you would outline to get to that outcome that you want at the end, right? So you need to analyze policy and power, right? So you need to be able to figure out the position of the policy and the power that it would hold during that process, during that advocacy phase. And you need to identify the targets and influential. So you need to be able to, whether it be an organization that you're targeting, or a community group, or a group of individuals, or the government, and the influencers being the key individuals that you need to target to get that decisions signed off on, or get that decisions passed, right? And you need to develop your message. So create the content that you want to get across, build added strength. So you need to do whatever you need to get the message in a way that is, so you're coming from a position of strength, and you need to develop the messages so that whoever is listening, or whoever is hearing or reading that message understand that you're coming from a position of strength. And you need to develop and implement an action plan. So basically what you would do to get that policy or decision passed, you need to develop that plan for it, right? So you have some key things at the center of the cycle that you would do that could facilitate and help your advocacy be stronger and allow you to get more out of it, right? So that is gathering evidence. So whether it be evidence on the particular groups that you're engaging, or evidence of other like policies and stuff like that. Yeah, you need to be able to gather the necessary evidence that would help strengthen that advocacy move, right? And then you need monitoring and evaluation. So after you would have implemented You need to monitor it and see if it works out and evaluate it. So if it doesn't, you know, okay, but this didn't particular work, so what needs to be adjusted, which will help you with feedback and with other advocacy moves in the future, right? And involving children is also a good move when you're advocating. You have that bottom-up approach. So you get children involved, understanding, maybe not in fully based on the content, but at least have a basic understanding of what is it that you're trying to achieve, and you get them involved so they have that sense of ownership of that particular activity and that memory, and they would be a little bit more inclined to follow along those lines into the future as they grow older, and that is beneficial as well. And you need to be able to mobilize resources, right? So whether it be internet that you need, whether it be a computer or a printer or a screen, or maybe whatever it may be that you need to get the message across, you need to be able to know how to mobilize those resources, so that you, again, come from a position of strength and you get it done in the best possible way that shows that, yes, you're not only advocating for something, but you're serious, and that you're serious and that you're willing to get the projected outcome that you want from that advocacy, and you would go to the lengths and leaps and bounds to see it through. We follow on to the next slide. Right, so this would bring us to our second point of conversation tonight. So the second main point we'll be looking at tonight is representation. So as I said prior, we just basically went in the truth with the different modules within this one module. And the second one we'll be looking at is representation. So every fisherfolk leader is required to represent his or her organization in varying situations. And that is understandable as a fisherfolk leader, that you would need to be able to represent your organization in varying situations, right? You represent the organization and not yourself. So you have to be self-conscious of your position, and that you're not representing yourself when you go out to represent, but you're representing the organization. So you have to be mindful of your behavior and your conduct and the choice of words and stuff like that. That would basically, individuals would see you in the light of the organization rather than as your own personal agenda, right? So you need to articulate the organization's position. So that is where knowing your vision and mission and understanding your organization comes in critical. So that will help you be able to articulate your organization's position when you have those things down pat, right? And you need to ensure that you have proper personal deportment, right? So this is basically saying that you need to have the good manners, right? And as I was saying earlier, when individuals see you or on the street or wherever it may be, they need to see you as that person that is representing the organization and not just anyhow you feel type of behavior and stuff like that. You need to know that you're responsible for whatever amount of individuals that may be within your organization, and that you are the person that they would have put in that position to lead and guide them, and you need to act accordingly with respect and stuff like that, right? And do not make it personal. So during representation, you don't make things personal. You need to be level-headed and be able to be neutral and not take things personal when there's no need, right? And make representation and advocate on issues, policy, and the fisherfolk organization position. So right, so every fisherfolk leader needs to be able to do that. Make representation and advocate on issues. So whether it be an environmental issue, whether it be an issue that is affecting your fishers, whether it be an issue that you have, let's say, with the state on some policy that you want change or you want implemented, you need to make good representation and advocate on these things. And you need to be able to understand your FFO position. So I say that is where your vision statement and your mission and stuff like that is key and critical. As in, you know your organization and you know what you're about, so you know what you stand for. And you need to be able to stand firm and at times not wane and waver, but represent to the best of your ability. All right, so move on to the next slide. Right, so there are 3 P's to representation. The first P is to prepare well, right? So before you go to represent your organization, which a lot of the times is, as the fisherfolk leader, is almost all the time. So whenever you would speak to somebody, they would see you in that light. So even if it's an informal representation, you as the individual are the representation all of the time. So you need to prepare well. And this is when you're going to engage a group or different, whether it be private sector or NGO, you need to prepare well. So you need to know your organization's vision, mission, goals, values, cultures, and objectives. So you need to know what your organization is about. You need to know your organization history and what your organization stands for and where your organization is going. And you need to be clear on the issue which require your input, right? So before you go out to represent, you need to know what you're going out to represent for, and be clear on the issue that you would be representing against, right? And which particular issues would require your input. So you could go to a forum that they would have many issues, and not all of them would fall into your organization's field or sphere, and you need to be able to know, well, what issues that you need to address and what issues that you need to let be. Right, so you need to understand the position of your organization regarding the issue and why. So right, so you need to know why this is an issue for our organization. How did this become an issue? When did this become an issue? Right? And develop a strategy to defend the position. So you need to go there with a plan. You don't just go there haphazardly and expect to give off good representation. So before you go to represent, you need to have that plan so that you are able to defend your position well. Move to the next slide, please. Right, so the next P is to prepare better, right? So develop your knowledge assets on the issue at hand, right? So you need to develop your knowledge based on whatever issue that you would be representing against. So you don't want to, again, go to a forum or a meeting or to engage a party and you don't have at least some knowledge on the issue that you're coming to represent against. You would not represent very well, right? And you need to know the other players involved in the process. So that is also very key and critical. So you basically need to do your homework, in other words, and have a basic understanding, or if not an in-depth understanding of the other individuals that you'll be engaging while you're representing. One that kind of helps you be able to give the information that is necessary to the individuals, and it helps things flow a little bit better and for you to be understood a little bit more. And when you know the other players that is involved in the process, it takes it makes it a little bit easier to give your position or to give your stance. And be clear on the position of the other players and the why. So yeah, so you may have varying interests during representation, and you need to be clear on the position of the other players. So you need to know why the other players are saying what they're saying and why, because they're representing as well. So you need to understand their position and why behind their representation, right? And you also need to understand the decision-making process and develop a strategy to be influential. So you also need to basically have an understanding of how these processes usually go about. So you're not, well, we say wet fowl here in Grenada. So you're not a wet fowl going into a meeting room or, so you're not fresh then. You have at least a basic understanding of how even if you have never been to representing before, you still could probably ask a colleague or ask somebody else that would have done it before, and they would kind of guide you through the decision-making processes so that you could develop a strategy that would basically allow you to be influential. Right? Next slide, please. Right, so the last P of representation is to prepare best, right? So offer relevant, rational, and factual information to support your position. So right, so there's one thing that nobody could ever refute, and that is facts. As long as you present factual information and you have your sources and it could be validated, nobody could refute that. I mean, they could try, but it'd be very, very clear that what you're presenting is factual information, right? You need to clearly articulate the dangers and risks to your organization and the other positions and that the other positions pose, right? So you need to be able to basically explain what would, if we were to go down this road here, what is going to be the risk to my organization? Or if we're going to go down this road here, what is going to be the risk to your organization? You need to be able to know that. So that would help decision making and allowing you to come to a common understanding. Right? So offer some solutions that do not endanger your position. Right? So even if you're not engaged, let's say in a particular issue, you could still offer some solution that does not endanger your position. So you basically become like a neutral party in that instance. But may still embrace some elements of the positions of others. So you could still, even if you're trying to be neutral, you could still say, oh yes, I understand you, and I understand you, and yes, this is applicable to me and or my organization in certain ways, and this is applicable to my organization in certain ways. Even if you're not engaged in that particular issue, you still could contribute to the positions of others. And you need to be open to hearing from others as well. So you need to make sure that you have the right attitude and you're not being draconian and you just want your way and it's my way or the highway kind of behavior. So you need to approach representation with the right attitude. you need to be able to give and take, and basically go back and forth, and not just, if we don't get it done this way, or if we don't get it done my way or my organization's way, then it don't even make sense I'm being here. Right? So that is understandable. Right? So next slide, please. Right. So we have some questions and discussions here. So this is some questions I'm posing to the audience here tonight. Have you ever represented your organization? So let's get some well, we could just, anybody that would have represented the organization could just say aye.
I kinda.
Aye.
So that's 2 ayes. Okay. Did you do it properly based on your assessment? What was the feedback from your other organization members? So based on your assessment, did you think that you did it properly? The ayes.
Yes, I did.
I guess the short answer would be yes, because what we were advocating for, we were successful in. So I guess that's a yes.
Okay, great. And what was the feedback from your other organization members? So were the organization members, what was the feedback that they gave you when one became successful, and one when you successfully represented their organization?
On my account, at the end of the day, everybody was satisfied with the outcome, and the consensus was reached, and both parties was happy with the outcome.
Okay, great.
I think it was about the same. I think everyone was satisfied with the outcome. The opposing side of the fence, I guess, a little bit less so, seeing as we were the ones who basically got them to agree to what we intended them to.
Okay. Right. So that is good that you
And
guys
what
would have
happened
represented well, and you would have won. I wouldn't say won, but you would have got your decisions passed when you represented your organization, when you were advocating. Right. So what are the areas of advocacy and representation that a fisher organization can lead? So anyone could jump in here and answer that question.
Repeat the
So what
question,
kind of,
please.
go ahead.
Repeat the question.
What are the areas of advocacy and representation that a fisher organization can lead? So what movement of advocacy and representation that a fisher organization might engage in?
Policies that is affecting the general operation of fishers, and by extension that will adversely affect the community, and even the policy makers, because a lot of times you find that the policy makers do things without consultation, and then when it reaches to that point, the effects that it will have most of the time negatively on fishers, and therefore consultation, advocation, and representation are critical to handle, hammer out those issues and those policies that have been put in place, and where the compromise position must be reached so that at the end of the day, the long-term benefit is the general community, both the suppliers and the demand people who are purchasing or taking advantage of what we are supplying.
Okay, great. Thank you for the input. Before I could continue, Peter, would you mind telling us which organization that you're from and which country?
Union Island, representing the National Fisher Folk Organization, because I am not representing the Union Island Fisher Folk Cooperative, because at the moment, most of the people who are involved in fishing do not take fishing as a business. And a lot of the policies that I try to push forward, they are not seeing it. And as a result of that, they're looking at me as the bad person, you know, and because in the long run, when people are not transparent and accountable to what they're
Can everyone hear me? Seems like there's some connection issues.
Yes, Tylon, you're back. We miss Peter though.
Okay.
So perhaps you can resume, Tylon.
Yeah. So let's proceed. So let's move on to the next slide. So negotiation, discussion aimed at reaching an agreement, right? So we all engage in negotiation. Whether it be in your household and you let's say you want that last slice of bread and you say, well, I'll go do this later for you, or I'll go do this tomorrow for you. That's basically a negotiation right there. So that's like a soft negotiation, right? So the basis of a negotiation is a discussion aimed at reaching an agreement. So at the end of a negotiation, you should have an agreement, right? A negotiation is a discussion to resolve an issue in a way that is acceptable, right? So you try to avoid conflict while you're negotiating, even if conflict may arise. You try to avoid it as much as possible. Right, and during negotiating, you would compromise and you would come to a consensus or understanding, and or an understanding is achieved. So sometime during negotiation, you would have, like, say, we say a give and take. So you compromise even in your homes and your relationships and stuff like that. We have those same compromises where you'd say, all right, well, I understand, and or you're willing to be that person that loses for the benefit of that relationship. So compromising a lot of the times has to do with you wanting, or you giving up certain rights, or one person giving up certain rights or their position so that you could preserve that relationship. And understanding is achieved. So at the end of a negotiation, an understanding should be achieved, whether it be an understanding for or understanding against, or somewhere in the middle, an understanding should be achieved at the end. Next slide, please. Right, so there's 5 steps in the negotiation process. So, right, so the step number 1, you have preparation and planning. Right, so during the preparation and planning step, you would answer some questions. So what is the nature of the conflict? So conflict arises during negotiation many times. So you would ask yourself, what is the nature of the conflict? What is the history of the conflict? So sometimes a conflict could be going on for 5-10 years, and you've been going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So you need to understand the history of the conflict. For example, Cuba and America, that's just an example where, you know, they've been going back and forth for many, many years. Right, so within your fisher folk organizations, you would have these conflicts that would arise, and you might have conflicts that has history behind it, and you need to be able to understand that as well. And conflict would transcend, as in sometimes you as a new fisher folk leader or somebody that is just joining, let's say, the board, for example, they could have had conflict before and you weren't necessarily aware of it, and you just come along, but you being fresh and new doesn't remove the conflict. So you need to be aware of conflict that could potentially have some history there, right? And you need to, during your preparation and planning phase, you need to have involve negotiation, right? So you need to identify your negotiation goals. So what you want at the end of this at the end of the negotiation, what is the outcome that you want from it, right? And you need to understand also that the other party has a goal as well, and you need to understand the other party's goal, as in what they want. So you understand your side during the negotiation, and you still have an understanding of their side. So you'll be able to better articulate and get your way, right? And you need to understand the other party's information. So information is always critical and key when you're negotiating. So who could, well, not all the times, but a lot of the times, who could talk and articulate and present more facts, especially if you're negotiating amongst multiple people and stuff like that, you would get the leeway, or you would get things to lean in your favor if you understand. So it's somewhat like a code process, right? And you need to develop a negotiation strategy. So, right, so during all the preparation and planning phase, you need to have all of that, right? And the more of that you have is the more better prepared you are to negotiate and come out successful. And you need to have definition of ground rules. So who will do the negotiating, right? So before, when you're in a negotiating room, let's say you have 4 or 5 different groups or entities, or 4 or 5 different individuals, you need to set some ground rules, and you need to be involved in setting the ground rules so that you would participate in setting the ground rules, so that you are involved in the entire negotiation process. So there's nothing that would go on and happen that you're not necessarily happy with. So you need to also identify the when. So when it's going to happen, the where, the limited issues, and any specific procedures. So anything that you want to see happen. So whether it be you want to see the agenda, you want to see this this person would speak first, this person would speak second, this person would would speak third or whatever, you need to have those specific procedures in place so that you have a smooth flow of things. So this is the benefit of having ground rules. You keep things in a smooth flowing manner, right? So and you also need to have clarification and justification. So you need to explain, amplify, clarify, and bolster and justify the original demand, right? So that is self-explanatory. You need to have bargaining and problem solving. So give and take in trying to hash out an agreement, right? So during the negotiation process, you need to understand bargaining and you need to understand problem solving. So you're there to get the issues ironed out and not necessarily create more issues, right? And you need to give and take in trying to hash out an agreement. So that's where you have the compromise factor coming into play here, right? Where you have basically everyone being probably not 100% happy, but they're not sad or they're not disappointed from that particular agreement. And you also need to be able to stand firm when you're negotiating as well. So sometimes you need to put on your foot and say, watch me, I ain't moving away from this position. So all of these things and them are things you need to understand, and that is also acceptable and respected based on the way you go about to do it and the context and the demeanor in which it would have been done. So you need to know where you could do something like that, and you need to, and during the negotiation process, you need to ensure that you have some form of closure and you move to that implementation stage. So you would have a formalizing the agreement. So after you would have discussed and you would have go back and forth and you would have everybody would have aired their voices and everybody would have aired their concerns and whatnot, then you would have you would formalize the agreement. So that is where, okay, yes, this is what we concluded, and time for us to get pen on paper now and say, all right, well, yes, this is what it is, and there you would have that formalizing of whatever you all were negotiating during that period. Next slide. So move on to the next slide. All right. So conflict. So conflict, as we all know it, is inevitable. So you must have conflicts. Sometimes we have conflict with our own selves and thoughts and things a lot of the time. So even within ourselves, we just have conflict. So conflict is inevitable, right? A disagreement or argument. So that is what conflict is. It's a disagreement or an argument, right? And conflicts come about from a opposition of interests. So when you have different opposing interests, that is when conflict would come around. We move on to the next slide. So these are some sources of conflicts. So we have relationships. So in our relationships, as we all know, that you would tend to have conflicts. So you have personality clashes, as in one might be a little bit more introverted, one might be a little bit more introverted. You might have a little different of interest, and because of that, you would have a personality clash, right? You also have negative emotional interactions. So you have sometimes it's not necessarily intended, but let's say something would have happened to this particular individual and, you don't necessarily know and you come in good faith. Sometimes you get a negative response out of it, or out of them. So sometimes you have a negative emotional interaction that you're not necessarily in control of, or you don't even a lot of the times know why it would have been like that. Right? So all of these are sources of conflict. Sometimes that person could have been having a bad day. Who knows? You would have a difference of opinion. So this is conflict 101. So this is what I believe in. So beliefs and opinions and stuff like that tend to stir up a lot of conflict. So this is what I believe in. This is my opinion. This is where I stand. And you have some opposing parties, some opposing groups, some opposing individuals, and this is what this is where I stand. And then you have two ends of the spectrum there, and then with that you tend to have a lot of conflict, right? And information. So another source of conflict would be information, or more so misinformation, right? So basically, but I don't want to say it's bad information. So providing bad information, sometimes it's not intentional, but information have a tendency to change and to be corrupted as it pass on and stuff like that. So sometimes you would have heard something and you shared it and it's misinformation and you didn't know of it, but let's say the other individual know or have a little bit more facts than you, or actually knows the truth. That a lot of the times tend to cause a lot of conflict, right? And we need to be aware of that. Both the person that would have had the more facts and the person that has the misinformation. And also lines of communication. So I would have noticed within like certain groups and even within our fisher folk organization, you often have some conflict within with the lines of communication. So for example, let's say a board decision was made or certain things were spoken to at a board level, that the organization, the rest of the body, the rest of the membership doesn't necessarily know of it. But you have certain things that they would have seen that kind of prompt them to want to find out. So sometimes even before it prompts them to want to find out, sometimes you get conflict. So sometimes these lines of communication also creates conflict, and you have to be very careful when you're dealing with certain information, as in sometimes you might be able to tell your membership certain things, but you have some things, especially when you're dealing with advocacy and policies and whatnot, sometimes you don't want to give them false hope or false promises, as in sometimes you're not at that end tape yet. You're trying to get there, but you're not at that end tape yet. So sometimes it's better to withhold information or use your better judgment sometimes, so to prevent individuals from getting high and low. So they'll be all happy and stuff like that, and then they boil down when they realize that, yeah, you would have tried, but things didn't work out the way you wanted it to. So you have to be, so lines of communication does cause a lot of conflict sometimes. And then you have difference of interests, so personal gain versus duties, or multiple interests. A lot of these things cause conflict. So if you are representing the fisher folk organization, for example, you shouldn't be also bashing the fisher folk organization in the same breath. That going against it by supporting another group that doesn't necessarily support your vision, your mission, your goals, and stuff like that. It basically shows that you have multiple interests, and that would create conflict, as in anybody that understands that would point it out and would tell you about it, or they would make certain remarks or comments, or they might even start spreading stuff in the street and stuff like that, and that would create both internal and external conflict within your organization. And you're, as a Fisherfolk leader, in Fisherfolk Leader 101, you know that you are there to represent your body and your membership and not yourself. So you should not be a Fisherfolk leader for personal gain, right? And that again is a conflict of interest, right? So you need to be able to understand your duties. And when I say not, sometimes your personal gain out of it is, well, your personal gain out of representing a Fisherfolk organization is to see that Fisherfolk organization flourish and your membership grow and make it more economical for your fishers and stuff like that. So your personal gain should be the betterment of the Fisherfolk organization itself, right? And so you have structures. That is also some sources of conflict. So resource allocation. So we want to invest in this particular project, or we want to do this particular thing, and some individuals don't necessarily see that, whether it be on the board level or you have issues aligned coming about from that, and these things would cause conflict. So resource allocation, whether it be financial or other, could cause conflict. And you have your management structure. So sometimes this person don't like that this person is in that position, or that person is in this position, or they're doing this particular thing, and that causes some conflict as well. So all of these are different sources of conflict. You move on to the next slide. So is there a place for conflicts? As in, is conflicts beneficial? And conflicts help with problem identification. So after a conflict, you would have identified, well, hey, there's a gap here. There's a problem here that wasn't addressed or is now being addressed, and that is why there is a conflict. So conflicts help with problem identification. It also helps with first-hand problem solving skills. So from dealing with problems over and over and over, you would develop the skills to be able to even foresee potential conflicts before it happened. And then you would have that skills to be able to solve conflicts relatively easy. And conflicts also build healthier relationships, right? So after you beef it out, or after you would have had that spat, then the rebuilding or the reconnecting portion of that would allow you to be building back even stronger and facilitating the environment for healthier relationships and stuff like that, right? It also improve productivity. So you could have a conflict on, let's say you're on the board and you have a particular conflict, and let's say somebody was saying that, well, I'm positive that you can do this particular thing, for example. And they say, what's wrong with you? I could do this thing. And indeed, they would have gotten it done. So yes, they had some conflict there, but because of that conflict, it would have improved productivity. So conflict kind of motivates people to prove the other person wrong sometimes. And it also affects your personal growth. So with conflict, you would grow and develop from dealing with it. As you say, you have those problem solving skills that you develop, and that helps your personal growth as well. So you move on to the next slide. So resolving conflicts, the ability to negotiate, which is the give and take. You have conflict management, which is limiting the negative aspects of conflict and increasing the positive aspects. So that is conflict management, right? You have conflict resolution, which is reaching a peaceful resolution to a dispute. So, right, so at the end of a conflict, that is where you want to be, at peace. And both require a level of negotiation. So both would require some back and forth here, some lobbying and some engagement. Right, move on to the next slide, please. So resolving conflicts. Right, so you have a chart here, or well, different boxes showing you or annotating different things. And you notice on the left side, you see importance of achieving a goal. And in the bottom, you notice importance of a relationship. So on the left side, you have avoiding and competing, right? So you would also notice that you have low and high. So on the low end of things, whether it be on the importance of achieving a goal or the importance of a relationship, you have avoidance and you have competition and stuff like that. So this is the things that would basically cause the conflict to not be resolved, right? And when you're dealing with conflict, you have to again self-appraise and ask yourself, what is more important? Is the conflict more important, or is the end goal of what I want out of the conflict more important, or is the relationship I have with the group or the individual or whatever party, is that more important? And you would guide the process accordingly. So you have collaboration, which is both parties win, and in an ideal conflict, that is what you're going to get. Some collaborating, maybe some conflict at the beginning, but at the end, everybody comes together and both parties win. You have compromise. We spoke about compromise through the presentation. You have accommodating, right? So one party just gives up and tell the party to go ahead. And then you have some avoidance. So no, we staying away from it. We deal with it another time and nothing gets resolved. And you have competing. One party seeks to satisfy its interests regardless of the impact of the other party. So it's my way or the highway, regardless of the other person's position, right? So all of these things are things that is done to resolve conflict. Some are a little bit more beneficial and some are a little bit more on the negative side, but it's done to resolve conflict. Except avoidance, which basically just pushes it to the side and leaves it to fester. Next slide, please. So, right, leaders must play a role in resolving conflict importantly. So these are some key things to do that would help you resolve conflict. So listen effectively, right? It said that leaders are the last to speak during conflicts and stuff like that. So they listen to both parties and then they would come with a neutral solution, or they would give their position and try to see if they could iron out things, right? And they would identify specific causes. So they would find the root of that particular conflict. They would express their own needs. So for example, if they don't necessarily want this conflict to be a thing, they would express how they feel about that conflict, right? They view conflict situations as an avenue for growth. So you could also view conflict as an avenue for growth. So this person and this person, let's say two individuals on the board or in a group isn't communicating very well. And then after they had some conflict, you realize that they communicate a lot more. So they had some things that they had on their chest that they wanted to get out. And, you know, it was just festering there. But after they got it out, you realize that, wait, these two individuals, they come closer and more friendly than ever. So much so that nobody could get in between them, right? So it also creates the avenue for growth and focus on the specific issues which with causing escalation. So leaders are able to focus on what caused the conflict to escalate. Next slide, please. Right, so these are some food for action. So so again, I would have said that earlier. So if you believe in these statements, say aye. So our members need a voice, and there is power in numbers and respect for organizations. So our members need a voice, and there is power in numbers and respect for organizations. So who believes that, say aye.
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 Okay. There are matters, issues, policies that need to be addressed to better the industry. So who believe that there are issues and policies that need to be addressed to better the fishing industry? Say aye. Or raise your hand, yes. Okay. Fisher organizations have a responsibility to advocate for and represent their members. So fisherfolk organizations have that responsibility to advocate for and represent their members. Who believe that? Raise your hand or say aye. Okay, great. And conflict will arise in the process due to difference in opinions, values, and interests. So who believes that conflict will arise as long as there is a difference of opinions, there's a difference of values and interests? Say aye or raise your hand. So aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. So this brings the end of my presentation tonight. I'm happy that we all made it to listen to me. Thank you very much. I know I would have gone probably a 5 minutes or so over the allotted time, but thank you for your patience. I'll turn you over now to Nadine.
Well, this is a very interesting topic, always one of my favorites. So with Rich's permission, we will go an additional 5 minutes more because we need to have an open discussion to see if there's anyone that really wants to have a conversation on what was presented. It was advocacy, representation, negotiation, and conflict resolution. So you can lower your hands. Galaxy A20, who is that? Is that Miss Paulette from Jamaica? You would need to unmute Galaxy A20. I just want to know who is behind that phone. And Miss Sinovia, you can lower your hand. So now, if you want to
I've been trying to I've been trying that thing, not working out. I don't know why. I've been trying for the longest while.
No worries. I just wanted to differentiate between those who had their hands risen and who wants to have a conversation. We really are over time. So at least one person, do you want to speak on any of the issues presented by Tylon? Our deputy, we have our treasurer, Winsberg, Janarine, Verne. Or we want to go? Well, we can call it a night. It has been a very long day. Even Tylon himself had a very rough day. So let's.
Good night, Nadine. I just want to he was calling on me.
Yes. Oh, I was just saying if you want to say some last words as our leader, Mr. Winsberg Harry.
Yes, I will say something to wrap up. First, let me say thanks on behalf of the executive members of the CNFO Network of Fisher Folks Organization. A special thanks to Mr. Tylon for a wonderful presentation tonight. I think it was well covered, and I think it's well crafted and come over. And let me continue to bless Tylon as we move forward in the direction of our Fisher Folks leaders and taking leading responsibilities in terms of being this young fisher to do facilitating these online training. This is something that the Caribbean Network of Fisher Folks Organization is really pushing towards our Fisher Folks Organization in terms of strengthening our capacity as fisher folks in our region and how to assist our membership and even asking persons to get involved and continue to share the link for this Leadership Institute. I think CNFO is doing a wonderful job, but I would like to see that we have more persons joining this online training, that it could help and strengthen our organization in the way going forward for our membership and make better representation and better understanding for fisher folks in each and every one of our respective country. Let me say thanks again for everybody as a fisher myself and as the vice chair of the CNFO network. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I just want to read. It's very important for us to capture also the conversation in the chat. Ms. Claudette had mentioned that conflict is a must in any organization, but how we seek to resolve it is what matters. Last comment presented in one of my university classes today, spreading the benefits of small-scale fisheries. I got an A. Congratulations, Tylon. Tylon received an A. Your interaction with the Leadership Institute assisted your performance. Well, this is the end of the program for tonight. I hear my dog barking. And so I want to thank you once again. And I'm going to stop the recording. But before I do, as usual, I want you to turn on your cameras so that we can take a picture for promotion of the Leadership Institute. And also while we're doing that, I wanted to find out who is Miss Claudine Lewison. Miss Claudine, I need you to talk to us. I will end this recording now. Good night, everyone.
Hi, good night.
Miss Claudine, if you could put on your camera, that would be nice. Miss Claudine, where you come from?
And Lucia.
Oh, you're from the, okay. Yes, thanks. You're from the, which cooperative?